Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Rookie Card Collector 123 video. Today's episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about a topic that's running pretty rampant on YouTube these days. Kind of a synopsis of the vintage sports card hobby. That's my area of collecting, so I'm not going to talk on or speak on the modern card collecting side of things, but just stick to vintage. And how many YouTube videos have been put out noting that there's some sort of bubble going on right now in the hobby. And again, that pertains not only vintage but modern as well. And everybody's kind of got an opinion on that. And so I'm going to speak a little bit about my thoughts. I did a little bit of research over the past couple of days as to how it would affect the vintage collecting community. And what I really wanted to do is I wanted to look at, I think it's pretty well in agreement that the primary escalation or the primary heating up of prices seems to be taking place with the biggest name players as opposed to across the board like the case was in 2021 with the COVID situation. So what I did was I went and looked back at what I would consider the 5 most prominent post-war vintage baseball cards amongst collectors. And the 5 that I chose, I would assume are pretty unanimous, but maybe not. But the 5 I chose were a 51 Bowman Mantle rookie, a 51 Bowman Mays rookie, 54 Topps Hank Aaron rookie, a 55 Topps Clemente rookie, and a 52 Topps Mantle, because that's sort of the iconic card of the post-war era. I also looked into one other card. It was the 1949 Leaf Satchel Paige, which was a short print. Those numbers can be sort of distorted because of so few sales, but I'll talk about that as well. So what I did was I went back 5 years basically to the point of where the COVID bubble started, back in late 2020, early 2021. And I looked at the values of all 5 of these cards plus the Satchel Paige. And what I did was I looked across all lower to medium tier grades. So I started with Authentics and then went up to 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. Most players I did up till around 5.5 or 6 or so, the highest. Once you get above that, then the prices start escalating really quickly. It becomes mainly 6-figure cards. At that point, they're really not collector cards anymore, even if it is a collector that's buying them. They're really an investment at that level, I think. So I started with the lowest grade, worked up to my way up to about 5 or 6. So the first one I looked at was Roberto Clemente from 55 Topps. And again, going back, comparing from late 2020, early 2021 up until today, September 25. Across the board, just about and I use PSA mainly because there's more PSA sales. I also looked at SGC. The main discovery with the SGC look back wasn't so much how the market's changed from 2020 to 2025, as opposed to the fact that SGC values across the board has been pretty widely discussed already in many YouTube videos. SGC values over the past few years have gone up significantly, approaching almost an equal basis with PSA on a lot of cards until the recent news of SGC's situation. So I'm not going to make this a grading video, so I mainly looked at PSA. I kind of disregarded SGC numbers primarily because SGC across the board was almost always up or at least flat. mainly because the acceptance of SGC and the collector interest on that side, I think, has been stronger the last few years. Not really a market trend, more of a SGC favoritism trend. So again, going back to Clemente, so across the board, starting with Authentics, going up to, I believe I looked up to a PSA 6 on Clemente. There was one grade that was basically flat to slightly up today, 2025. All the other one and a half to two and a half, every single one was down from the 2021 time frame. And again, these people putting out these videos how we're in a bubble right now and prices are crazy, and I'm not going to buy any cards the rest of the year. I'm not going to buy any cards next year. You need to sell now because cards are just going to drop. Prices are just going to drop. So looking at Clemente over the last 5 year period, I don't see any escalation in prices. They're either flat or in almost every case prices are down. Next one I looked at was 54 Tops Hank Aaron. Not quite as drastic as Clemente, but for the most part, everything was either flat, same thing, low grade up till around PSA 5, I think is what I looked up on Aaron. Everything was either flat or just about every other number was down from the 2021 time frame. So I don't see prices escalating on Aaron either. Third one I looked at was Willie Mays, 51 Bowman. Willie Mays had a little more of a flatline approach as opposed to being down. But everything again was either down or flat. I think there was one grade where it was slightly up today. I believe it was around a two and a half or so. Could just be an anomaly. The next one I did was Mickey Mantle, the 51 Bowman, the rookie card. The Mantle was actually the closest one to being stable from 2021 up until today. Most of the grade levels from Authentic up until about a 4 or 4.5, most of the grade levels were pretty stable, slightly up, slightly down. Mantle was probably the most stable out of the four rookies that I looked at. And Mantle being the most iconic, might not come as a huge surprise. But so the fifth one I looked at then was the 52 Tops Mantle, which is hard to compare the top 5 post-war cards without having a 52 Tops Mantle. So I looked that one up, and that one was also similar to the Mantle Bowman rookie. Today's numbers are pretty comparable to what they were in 2021. One or two grade levels or half grades were actually higher. A couple of them were down, and several were kind of pretty close to where they were in 2021. So again, the Mantle seems to be out of the 4 players total that I looked at, the one that's best holding value. But again, the idea of this whole bubble thing is that prices are heating up and become insane, and even the Mantle cards, they're not any higher than they were 5 years ago in 2021. So I'm not really seeing the insane prices and the increase, and don't buy any more cards kind of a thing. The page I looked up, again, the big issue with that one was the very few number of sales. His cards are up today from 2021, maybe 25%, I would say, on the average. But again, that could be each grade level. There might be one sale to compare to from 2021 to 2025. And, the comparison could be, maybe a one was really trashed as opposed to the one that sold today was a nicer example, or vice versa. So with so few sales, it's kind of an irrelevant comparison. But if anything, the page, if I had a guess out of the 5 cards I looked at plus the page, based on the trends that I'm seeing in the market right now, if any of the 5 or the page was to be overheated right now, or possibly facing a downturn at some point because prices have gotten really high. I would say the Page is probably that card amongst the group that I looked at, all the post-war. I also looked at a few other post-war that were not rookie cards. I tend to look at a lot of rookie cards in terms of my market evaluations. That's mostly what I collect. Um, but I also looked at a few that were, again, the biggest names and also the rarest cards, the rarest sets. So I looked at a Willie Mays Hires Root Beer, not the test issue, the regular card, but the one with the tab. That one, in several different grades across the board, was up about 3 or 4 times from 2021 to today. The Hank Aaron from the same set, Hires Root Beer with tab, was not quite as much, but probably double across the board in different various grades there. I also looked up the Stallmeyer, Mays, and Mantle. Those were up significantly, 3x and 4x from 2021 up until today in various grades. But then there's a lot of other, bazooka cards, and it's not anything oddball or anything that's not mainstream. That it's not like everything is up. It's really just cards that seem to have caught the market and been the hot card of the moment or higher demand cards, like the Hires Root Beer with tabs, the Stallmeyers, things like that. I mean, there's Red Man tobaccos and Star Cow decals. They haven't really changed in price at all for the same players, Mays and Mantle and Aaron and all those guys. So the trend seems to be on the post-war side. I'm not really seeing much of any overheating of the market or any bubble that's about to burst and prices are going to drop. The one area that I possibly could see that is what I just mentioned last, which is some of these oddball sets that are very low population. The biggest names from the set, like Mays, Mantle, Aaron, Clemente, those are the ones, if any, I would be concerned about. Otherwise, the other millions of post-war vintage cards out there, I don't think there's any kind of significant change. A lot of people have mentioned, if you start looking at Alkaline sales, compared to 5 years ago, and Orlando Cepeda sales, and, an innumerable number of players, you're going to find that there's no trend and everything's basically almost flat. A lot of stuff went up in 2021 across the board. Everything just about went up in 2021. Almost everything came down after that. And a lot of the stuff today is still down. Majority is probably still down from 2021. But nothing new there. If you go back to the pre-war side, again, looking at just the biggest names, if you look at the Babe Ruths, if you look at the Honus Wagners, if you look at Ty Cobb, you look at Christy Mathewson, you look at Joe Jackson, you look at guys like that. 2021, during COVID, prices of all that stuff, the vintage pre-war took a little bit longer, but all that stuff ultimately jumped in price a lot. Just about every card of everybody I mentioned there. Today, the difference in price from 2021 to today, again, the past 5 years or so, on the biggest pre-war names, the guys I just mentioned. So we're not even talking about guys like Jimmy Fox and Grover Alexander and Cy Young and all-time greats, but just the really, really big names. Most of their cards, or a good number of their cards, are still fairly consistent with what they were in 2021. Some of them are down somewhat, some of them are up, a decent amount. However, there are select players, the ones I mentioned, and select sets, which are the sets that have been hot over the past few years, 5 years, let's say, such as a Cracker Jack set, W600 Sporting Life cabinet set, American Caramel, E90, um, E90-2 set that have Honus Wagner, and some of the caramel sets with Ty Cobb. Um, the Sporting News Babe Ruth of card, obviously. The Baltimore News Ruth, the T206 Wagner. So they're select cards, and I would imagine if I spent a week or two researching it, I can probably come up with about 50 or so cards. And again, we're talking the biggest names: the Joe Jackson, the Ruth, the Wagner, the Cobb, Mathewson, guys like that. 50 cards, biggest names, most prominent, most sought after sets of those players. So not every card in Cracker Jack, not every card in W600, not every card in the caramel sets is escalating and heating up. It's just strictly the biggest names, and not every card of the biggest names. It's just strictly the ultra rare, the super high demand cards. That's the stuff that's exploded in the past year, 2 years, 6 months, like that. That's the stuff that people say we're in a sports card bubble right now. To me, the vintage side, those are the cards. Like I said, I could probably, after given a little time, do some research and put together maybe a list of 50 cards or so. Those I would put into the high risk of price deflation category. Um, for the most part, all the other, again, millions of pre-war vintage cards, some are up somewhat from 2021, the last 5 years, some are down. Um, just like anything else, some of the bigger name players, the lesser name players, there's much less fluctuation, if anything. So again, even on the pre-war side, I'm not seeing the widespread bubble that the hobby is in, and the fear that prices are going to drop, and we're just repeating what happened in 2021. If you buy stuff now, you're going to get burned. Cards are going to be worth almost nothing. Down the road. It's just, if you look at the numbers, it's just not happening. And I think things are going to continue along the same path that they are. And I think a lot of this has to do with the very well documented investment side of the hobby, where there's a lot more people today than there was back in 2021 that have either been in the hobby now for 5 years or gotten into the hobby, and even more recently in the last year, 2 years, whatever, with a lot of funds to throw around. And they're targeting the cards they hear in the news, the top selling cards at each auction. The top 10 sales at Heritage, the top 10 sales at REA, the top 10 sales at Golden. And these are the cards that these investors with lots of money are targeting. And to me, that those are the cards I see that are going to continue to escalate until it reaches a point where everything reached in 2021, 2022, where it's just not sustainable. You've only got a few people, really buying the stuff. Eventually, those people get bored. They move on to something else, or whatever ends up happening. People start selling off because they feel like things have reached a peak, and not going to go any higher. And these are the cards that I think you can get really burned on. The stuff like the Kobe Bryant and the Michael Jordan refractors that from 2021, and the autograph cards and the inserts, and all that kind of stuff that dropped. LeBron James stuff, all the stuff that dropped 70-80% down from where it was at the peak. If you get into some of these super high-end Joe Jackson, Cracker Jacks, and higher grades or mid-grade even, Babe Ruth rookies, Honus Wagner, high demand cards, American Caramel cards, Sporting Life cards, these cards that were only $3,000 or $4,000 up until 2020, today are $30,000 or $40,000. So in the last 3, 4, or 5 years, we're talking 10x on some of these cards. And for the most part, they're all Wagner, Cobb, Jackson, Ruth. Mathewson, those guys. Nothing on the post-war side, nothing anywhere close to that. Even with Mays and Aaron and Clemente and Mantle, there's none of that type of craziness over there, and that has to do a lot with a much more availability of all those cards as opposed to a Babe Ruth rookie. Over the course of the whole year, there might be a half a dozen that come up for auction combined with all the major auction houses, or a Ty Cobb rookie, or or any of the cards that we're talking about. And the investors, the people spending the really big money right now in the hobby, are smart enough to stay away from beater copies, like ones that are creased through the player's face down the middle of the card and that kind of thing. So you can still get a big card for, I wouldn't call it affordable, but you can still get a big card at a price that a collector might possibly be able to manage. But it's going to be a horrible looking card, terrible eye appeal, because at that level, spending that kind of money, even people that are not that, don't have the expertise in the hobby, they can see it when a card is ugly or not. And I know recently there was an auction where there was a Bryce Williams Honus Wagner, which in today's market being what it is, I mean, that card should never sell for less than a couple of $100,000 probably, no matter what the grade is. It sold for $75,000, I believe, in an REA auction maybe a year ago or so. And that's because it had a big crease right through the middle of his face. And these are portrait cards, so the face takes up a good part of the card. Nobody bid that one up. It could have been a 1, but a better eye appeal one probably sell for $200,000 as opposed to the 75. So doesn't mean us true collectors are ever going to have a chance to get any of these really big cards or the really big names again. It's just seems to be more and more becoming an impossibility until the market has some sort of correction. Some of the huge money that's in the market right now maybe exits the market, and somewhere down the line maybe prices come back to more affordable levels. I have no crystal ball, so I can't predict that that's going to happen, or it's never going to happen, or anything. But anyway, I wanted to share my thoughts on the bubble that so many people are making videos about. Like I said, this bubble, at least on the vintage side, the little bit I know about modern, if I had to give a guess, I would say, yeah, it probably is. The modern market is overheated, and something's probably going to change. Something's going to probably happen, but I stick to my vintage world. That's what I know. And to me, on that side of things, the only risk is the cards that I mentioned. If you've got a lot of money and you can afford to lose it, and you buy those cards, that's great. If you don't have a lot of money and you're doing it more as an investment, my thought on it would be just be very careful, because some of these cards are up 3x, 4x, 10x from where they were 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. And is that sustainable? We saw what happened during COVID with 90% of prices coming way down within a year or so. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Have a great day, and I'll catch you on the next one.